Have you ever heard a story so strange, so unbelievable, that it sounds like it's straight out of a science fiction movie? Today, we're diving into one of World War I's most enduring and bizarre mysteries, the disappearance of the Norfolk Regiment at Gallipoli. This isn't just a tale of war. It's a story that blurs the lines between historical fact, battlefield confusion, and a legend that has captivated people for over a century. The year is 1915. The setting is the brutal Gallipoli Peninsula in modern-day Turkey. The Allied forces, primarily British, Australian, and New Zealand troops, are locked in a deadly stalemate with the Ottoman Empire. The goal was to seize control of the Dardanelles Strait, knock the Ottomans out of the war, and open a supply line to Russia. But the campaign was a disaster, a meat grinder of trench warfare under a scorching sun. Among the British forces was the 1/5 Battalion of the Norfolk Regiment, a unit composed mainly of men from the Sandringham estate, the king's private residence. These weren't professional soldiers. They were gamekeepers, gardeners, and farmhands, led by the king's land agent Sir H. Rider Haggart's brother. They were known as the Sandringham Company. On August 12, 1915, the Norfolks were ordered to advance. They were part of a larger push to break the Turkish lines. What happened next is where history gets hazy and the legend begins. The most famous version of this story comes from a statement signed years later, in 1965, by 3 New Zealand sappers who claimed to be eyewitnesses. According to them, they watched from a vantage point as the Norfolk Regiment marched up a hillside towards a Turkish position known as Hill 60. As they advanced, they walked into a strange, loaf-shaped cloud that was hovering on the ground. It was described as being incredibly dense, almost solid-looking. One by one, the soldiers marched into this peculiar fog and simply vanished. The witnesses claimed that after the last soldier entered the cloud, it lifted slowly off the ground, joined other similar clouds in the sky, and drifted away against the wind, revealing an empty battlefield. There were no bodies, no signs of a struggle, nothing. An entire battalion of over 250 men had disappeared without a trace. For decades, this was the story. A British battalion, swallowed by a mysterious cloud, possibly an alien UFO, and whisked away from the battlefield. It sounds incredible, right? It was published in magazines, featured in paranormal books, and became a cornerstone of UFO lore. The idea that these men were unkilled but were instead taken was a powerful and compelling narrative. But what's the truth? Is this really a case of extraterrestrial intervention in World War I? Well, as with most legends, the reality is a lot more complex, and frankly a lot more tragic. To understand it, we have to peel back the layers of myth and look at the hard, historical evidence. First, let's talk about the eyewitness account. The statement from the New Zealand sappers was made 50 years after the event. Human memory is a funny thing, especially when it comes to traumatic events like war. Over time, stories can get embellished, details can merge, and what we think we remember might not be exactly what happened. It's also worth noting that no other accounts from the thousands of other soldiers at Gallipoli mention this strange man-eating cloud. That's a pretty big detail to miss. So, if it wasn't a UFO, what actually happened to the Norfolk Regiment? The historical record paints a much grimmer picture. The attack on August 12 was chaotic and poorly coordinated. The Norfolks, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Sir Horace Proctor Beauchamp, advanced into a treacherous landscape of thick scrub, deep gullies, and smoke from a forest fire that had been raging in the area. This fire created dense smoke that hugged the ground, which could easily be mistaken for a strange, low-hanging cloud. Instead of vanishing into a mist, the historical consensus is that the Norfolks charged too far, too fast. They outpaced their supporting units and became isolated deep behind enemy lines. In the confusion of battle, surrounded by smoke and unfamiliar terrain, they were likely ambushed and overwhelmed by a superior Turkish force. The Ottoman soldiers were fierce defenders of their homeland. The idea that they would just let a British battalion march past them unmolested is highly unlikely. The Norfolks, cut off and surrounded, would have fought bravely to the last man. This wasn't a mysterious disappearance. It was a desperate, brutal last stand. For years, the British military listed the men as missing. This was common in the chaos of World War I, where battlefields were churned into unrecognizable mud pits. Families back home held onto the hope that their loved ones were captured, not killed. The vanished battalion legend offered a strange sort of comfort. A mysterious fate was perhaps easier to accept than a brutal death. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place after the war ended. In 1919, a British graves registration officer was investigating the area around Hill 60. A Turkish farmer led him to a small, isolated valley. There, scattered across the ground, he found the remains of 180 bodies. Among them, he discovered Norfolk Regiment cap badges and other insignia. It was the lost battalion. According to the Turkish farmer, the men had been found in a ravine, many of them having been killed in a desperate fight at a small farmhouse. The bodies had been left where they fell. This grim discovery confirmed the military explanation. The Norfolks had been cut off and annihilated. So, where does that leave the legend? The story of the Vanishing Battalion is a powerful example of how myths are born. It combines the real-life horrors of war, the confusion of the battlefield, the fallibility of human memory, and our innate desire for stories that are bigger than life. The cloud was most likely smoke from a forest fire. The disappearance was a tragic military blunder that resulted in the unit being cut off and wiped out. But the legend persists because it's a more compelling narrative. It's more mysterious and less pointlessly tragic than the truth. It transforms a story of slaughter into a paranormal enigma. It speaks to the chaos and the sheer scale of loss in World War I, where entire units could be wiped from existence in a matter of hours. The story of the Norfolk Regiment isn't about aliens or phantom clouds. It's a human story. It's about a group of ordinary men, farmhands and estate workers who were sent into an impossible situation. They fought with incredible courage and paid the ultimate price. Their final moments weren't spent being lifted into the sky, but fighting for their lives, surrounded and outnumbered, on a dusty hillside, thousands of miles from home. While the UFO story is exciting, the true story is a powerful reminder of the real cost of war. It honors the memory of the soldiers not as characters in a sci-fi tale, but as brave men who faced a terrifying end. Their story is no less compelling for being true. In fact, it's even more profound. They didn't vanish. They were lost to the fog of war, and their sacrifice deserves to be remembered for what it truly was. What do you think? Do you believe there's more to the story, or does the historical evidence tell the whole tale? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. It's a fascinating piece of history where fact and folklore collide. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into a historical mystery, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the past. See you next time.